Hey everyone, if you've been feeling like the last 10 years in Canada have been one long grind, sky high bills, homes that feel like they're priced for billionaires, and wages that just can't keep up, you're not alone. I'm your host Ian, and today we're diving into something that's been buzzing around conversations from coffee shops to comment sections: the lost decade. It's a term that's thrown around a lot when people talk about Justin Trudeau's time as Prime Minister, from 2015 to 2025. What does it really mean? Was it all on him, or are there bigger forces at play that started brewing even before he took office? And crucially, how did this hit different generations? Boomers cashing in on their nest eggs, Gen Z juggling it all, millennials chasing the elusive first home, and Gen Z just trying to get a foot in the door. First off, let's define the beast. The lost decade. It's not some ancient history lesson, it's the stretch from when Trudeau swept in with the sunny ways promise in 2015 right up to his resignation earlier this year. Critics, especially from conservative side, slapped the lost liberal decade label on it during the 2025 election campaign, pointing to a pile of stats that paint a pretty grim picture. At its core, it describes a time when Canada's economy flatlined on a per person basis. We're talking annual inflation adjusted GDP growth per capita of just 0.3%. That's the worst record of any recent prime minister, scraping below even Stephen Harper's 0.5% and way under Jean Chrétien's 2.4% back in the 90s and early 2000s. If we'd kept up with the US growth over those years, every Canadian would have had about $4,200 more in their pockets annually by now. Instead, our per capita GDP in US dollars barely budged, from around 43,600 in 2015 to 44,500 by 2023, leaving us at 67.5% of the Americans' level, down from 76.4% a decade earlier. Taking a step to zoom out on all this, it's not just about that growth. It's the national debt as well. It doubled from about $800 billion in today's dollars to $1.4 trillion by late 2024. That's $15,000 more debt per person piled on over 10 years, or roughly $4 a day for every one of us. Productivity? Well, we're lagging so far behind the US that by 2024, the gap hit nearly 50%. And forecasts say we'll be dead last among 38 OECD countries through the 2020s and into the 2060s. Inflation spiked, eating into savings, and don't get me started on the housing. The average home price jumped from $430,000 in 2015, or roughly $557,000 adjusted for today's dollars, to over $713,000 by early 2025. That's $16,000 more per year, making a house $43 less affordable every single day since Trudeau's election. Rents, well, they're also up 107% in major cities. It's no wonder polls showed 7 in 10 Gen Z and millennials felt the government drop the ball on affordability. So let's take a look. Was this all Trudeau's doing? Look, it's always tempting to pin it on one guy, especially with flashy policies like the carbon tax, which jacked up energy costs and got blamed for throttling the oil patch just as global demand shifted. Or the flood of immigration without matching housing builds, which supercharged demand in a supply-starved market. Massive deficit spending too. Trudeau's team read red ink year after year, ballooning the bureaucracy and promising sunny ways, but delivering what felt like endless winter. Rewinding a bit to the Harper years, 2006 to 2015, Canada was riding a high off the commodity boom. Oil, mining, you name it. And Harper's conservatives steered us through the 2008 global financial meltdown better than almost anyone. Unemployment dipped to historic lows around 5.8% by 2007. And we clawed back all those lost jobs within a couple of years, while the US and Europe slogged through a lost half decade. By 2015, budgets were balanced. Growth hummed at a steady clip, and the middle class was touted as one of the world's richest by outlets like the New York Times. Per capita GDP growth averaged 0.5%. Not fireworks, but solid, especially with low inflation and a banking system that didn't implode like others. Harper gets dinged for underinvesting in infrastructure and letting productivity stall, which left some cracks, but overall, he handed off an economy in a way better shape than the one he inherited. Then came the curveball no one saw coming: the COVID pandemic. Supply chains from China coming to a halt, Russia's invasion spiking energy prices, and US under Trump and Biden that pulled ahead on reshoring manufacturing. Trudeau's big spending response, trillions in support, kept us afloat short term, but locked in that debt hangover. And immigration, well, pre-Trudeau levels were sustainable. His ramp up to 500,000 a year without zoning reforms or builder incentives turned a tight market into a crisis. So fault plenty on Trudeau for choices like prioritizing green funds over pipelines or green slush handouts that missed export opportunities. But global shocks and pre-existing underbuilding in housing, well, those were team efforts across the government. Now, the real gut punch. How this decade landed differently on each generation. Start with the baby boomers, born 46 to 64, now mostly 60 to 79 years old. They entered adulthood during the post-war boom, snagging homes at a ridiculous price. Think $20,000 in Toronto back in the 70s. The lost decade, well, it barely touched them. Many are equity millionaires with home values exploding under their watch. Inflation nips at fixed pensions, sure, but they're the ones sitting on $1 trillion in wealth ready to transfer to their heirs by 2026. The biggest handover in Canadian history. For real estate, boomers are the landlords cashing rent checks or downsizing and making a massive profit. But some face tough calls on long-term care costs eating to that nest egg. Next is the Gen X crowd, born from 65 to 1980, who are now 45 to 60 years old. They got sandwiched right in the middle. They bought in during the 90s and 2000s when prices were climbing, but still doable. Often dual income setups, the decade squeezed them with stagnant wages. Real earnings for 25 to 44-year-olds barely moved after inflation. And elder care for boomer parents plus kid tuition, housing-wise, they're locked in with high mortgages renewed at peak rates. But at least they own. The wealth gap widened here too. Xers' net worth grew, but not like the boomers, leaving them playing catch-up on retirement savings amid a shrinking manufacturing sector that shed 5% of jobs since 2018. Millennials, who were born from 81 to 96 and are now 29 to 44 years old, are the poster children for the lost stretch. Their prime earning years, well, they were smack dab in the middle of it. Student debt from the pre-2015 tuition hikes, then gig jobs post-2008, and now homes that take 25 years of full income just for a down payment, net worth for millennial households plunged 6.5% last year alone, as real estate cooled but affordability stayed brutal. Average rents up over 100%, forcing delayed marriages, kids, and moves back home. In real estate terms, it's a nightmare. They make up the bulk of renters, now outnumbering boomers for the first time. And the $1 trillion inheritance, it might help a few of them for sure, but most of them are locked out of the market that boomers dominate. Polls show that 70% of them think the system is rigged against them. And then we have the Gen Z, born 97 to 2012, the 13 to 28-year-olds, just stepping into the ring. They're inheriting the full fury, entry-level wages that haven't kept pace, rents gobbling 40% of paychecks in cities like Vancouver, and a job market heavy on precarious gigs. Housing? Well, forget owning soon. Prices doubled under Trudeau. Supply lagged immigration by hundreds of thousands of units yearly, and renovictions are pushing them further out. Add climate anxiety and a productivity slump that's forecasted to tank living standards, and you've got a generation fearing they'll be the first worse off than their parents. But here's the silver lining. Millennials and Gen Z aren't just sitting back. They're leaning into technology and innovation like never before, often because they have no other choice in this squeezed economy. Facing stagnant wages, high costs, and a job market that feels rigged, nearly half of millennials and Gen Z in Canada are eyeing side hustles to hit their financial goals, turning to digital tools to build micro businesses from their laptops. Think about it. Easy access platforms, apps, and online marketplaces have made it simpler than ever to launch a gig, sell handmade goods, or freelance in tech sectors. Youth entrepreneurship among these groups is on the rise, driven by a desire for career independence and fueled by immigrant millennials boosting fields like tech and healthcare. They're the engine of the economy, creating and building and selling in ways that older generations just could never have imagined, often out of sheer necessity to bridge the gap between paychecks and dreams, like saving for that down payment on a starter home. And right at the heart of this push is the emergence of AI, which has exploded onto the scene, could totally reshape how the world and Canada's economy runs. On one side of the debate, optimists see AI as a game changer for growth. If businesses here fast track adoption, it could pump up our GDP. boost productivity, and save workers hours each week. Think generative AI handling routine tasks, freeing up time for innovation. For the millennials and Gen Z who are already embracing it, this means new opportunities in a digital economy, motivating them to upskill and innovate. Canada has an edge on AI research. Harnessing it could reignite stagnant productivity, create jobs in emerging fields, and even help tackle housing shortages through smarter urban planning or real estate tech. But flip the coin. And the skeptics aren't wrong to worry. AI might not deliver that utopia, or worse, it could widen divides. More than 6 in 10 Gen Z and millennials fear it'll eliminate jobs, displace roles in sectors like manufacturing or admin that these generations rely on early in their careers. Gen Z and millennials fear it'll eliminate jobs, displacing roles in sectors like manufacturing or admin that these generations rely on early in their careers. Canada's slow business and public sector adoption risk leaving us behind, exacerbating inequality if AI benefits accrue to big firms while workers get left out without pro-worker policies like retraining programs. Plus, over-reliance could erode soft skills or lead to skill gaps. The debate boils down to this. AI could accelerate a streamlined digital economy, driving prosperity if we prioritize adoption and equity. Or it could amplify the lost decade's scars by automating away opportunities without safeguards. So what now? The lost decade isn't just numbers, it's delayed dreams, generational shifts, and real estate markets that became a symbol of inequality. Trudeau's era brought wins like childcare, diversity pushes, but the economic scars run deep, amplified by choices that ignored supply-side fixes. Now, if you're a boomer eyeing that downsize, a millennial hunting your break, or Gen Zer plotting your first move, hit the comments. How has this decade, or this past decade, the lost decade, shaped your story? Thanks for watching, subscribe for more, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.